is it? Is it 6:01? 6:01. We're a minute late. So I call to order I'll call to order the special meeting of the vacancy board. So we have two meetings that we're running that are to start at 6 o'clock. We'll start with the vacancy board meeting. And I'll be looking for a motion for the vacancy board to approve the meeting minutes from October 19th, 2024 and October 22nd, 2024. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Motion by the deputy mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Mellon. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Then I'm looking for a motion to authorize Borough Council to approve the minutes of this meeting at Council's December 4th, 2024 workshop meeting or any other public meeting of Council. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
It's a motion by the deputy mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Mellon. You're making it easy on me. Thank you. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Is there any public comment on the vacancy board meeting? Imagine there's not. Steph, we don't have anybody who has any questions about the vacancy board. Okay. Then I'm adjourning the vacancy board special meeting, and we'll move on to calling to order the workshop meeting of November 6th, 2024 of Carlisle Borough Council. And please rise with me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First is an opportunity for citizens to be heard. So if there's anybody who would like to provide any public comment on any issues of borough government, you may come forward and provide comment. Not seeing anybody step forward. Steph, assume there's no hand. No. Yeah, okay, thank you. And we'll move on to the presentation. So fiscal year ending 2023 audit, we have a representative from Smith Elliott Kearns.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm just going to do a quick presentation of the results of the 2023 audit for the borough. You should have already received your financial packet, which has the financial statements and our letters included in that. Some of the contents of that will be going over the presentation tonight, but it's not going to look anything like that. It's much more scaled down, but you should have all of that information already. So in summary, you have an unmodified audit opinion. That is the goal of an audit. It means it's a clean audit. There wasn't anything that we found during our procedures that required us to modify our opinion. There were no findings this year, either in the financial audit or in the federal program audit that we did. You had positive changes in your fund balance or net position for essentially all of your funds, except for highway aid. You did have a use of reserves in your highway aid in 2023, but other than that, you were able to add to your reserves in all of your other funds. The single audit this year was performed on your ARPA funds. You applied essentially the rest of the funds that you were allocated this year in 2023, so we had tested that program as our major federal program for the single audit, and there were no findings in that. Included in your financial packet is our audit report. This is where our opinion is housed. It's a multiple page report, but basically what we always like to remind you is what that report means. It means that the information included in the financial statements was deemed to be materially correct. There wasn't anything, whether it was erroneous or omissions, that materially would misstate the financial statement. So obviously within an audit, we can't look at every single transaction that occurs during the year. There's calculations and assessments that we go through to determine what transactions and how many we look at to help us provide that opinion. But it does mean that everything that you see included in your financial statements are materially correct. It is not providing an opinion on internal controls or on a fraud investigation. The financial audit that you had done was just that. It was looking over your finances, which is the normal audit that you have each year. Included in the financial statements is the management discussion and analysis. This is a required part of the financial packet, but we are not allowed to prepare it. We do help prepare the rest of your financial statements, but this is a document just based on the standards that we are not allowed to prepare. So that's prepared internally by management. We do look at it, compare it to the information that's in the rest of the financial statements, making sure there's no conflicting numbers or information. But that really is management and the borough's opportunity to come to provide a little bit more of a plain English narrative outside of all the required verbiage in the rest of the financial statements. And it also has comparative information in there as well. So what you're looking at here is just your general fund. This is your largest fund with the most activity. So what you're looking at is the 2022 to 2023 actual results compared to then the 2023 final budget and a variance to that. This is basically a statement that is in your financial statements as well, but it's a really good statement to look at to kind of see where you ended up compared to where you thought you would be and where you actually were, and compare that to the prior year as well. So you can see for the most part, you had a little bit of an increase in your revenue and a little bit of a decrease in your expenses. Nothing too significant happening in 2023 for the borough. You didn't have anything new or significant changes. The main thing that you did have, which isn't going to show in this analysis here. Let me just get to the fund balance. So what you're looking at here, your general fund, capital projects, highway aid, and asset forfeiture. This year in 2023, for the audit year, you did choose to transfer your composting activity um, from the basically a proprietary fund to your general fund. Along with that went everything else relating to it. For example, your related pension and OPEB and compensated absences and all of the accrual activity that otherwise was normally reported. When you transfer that to the general fund, that portion of the activity is no longer housed from an internal standpoint in the general fund. It's really just revenue and expense as everything is incurred. It only gets to the asset and liability standpoint when you get to the government-wide statements, which is where you have the conversion. We bring on your capital assets, your debt, all of that stuff. So within the detail of your financial statements, that was explained and disclosed, and there are different line items on those statements that acknowledge the net effect of moving that activity. There wasn't really a cash component to that. It was more of just a placement of where it ended up on the financial statements, but that net effect did flow over to the general fund. So what you can see here for the fund balance, you have different categories of fund balance. Essentially, the borough utilizes all of the potential categories of fund balance. You have all of them. The non-spendable is what you don't have the capacity to use that portion of the fund balance. That's the prepaid expenses you already paid for upcoming insurance costs, things like that. Inventories you already paid to have the inventory, so there's nothing you can actually utilize for that. So it's considered non-spendable. Restricted is where you have all of your other governmental fund residual balances. You have a little bit in your general fund. Restrictions are external. If you would get a contribution from an external party that required you to do something or hit a certain mark in order to be able to utilize those funds, then that's an external restriction. Uh, that's similar with your asset forfeiture funds. Highway aid and capital projects, that's mainly just restricted based on borough code, that you can only use those for road related or capital project related activity. Committed and assigned fund balance, those are the internal designations that either the board or management make to help set aside funds or reserves for upcoming costs. This could be for anything that you think is necessary, whether it be projects, whether it be related to a deficit budget that you pass going into the next year. It could be to save for medical expenses and insurance costs, things like that. There's lots of different things that you can, as a board, decide to allocate and carve out fund balance because you know those needs are coming and you're going to need to utilize some current reserves for them. Unassigned is everything else. The general fund is the only fund that can have unassigned fund balance, but you can see there basically once you do all of those other required carve outs, you have just under 10 million unassigned. Essentially, just what that means is that you can use those funds for whatever needs necessary to operate the borough. Your proprietary fund net income, you can see all of your different proprietary funds. These are the ones that are reported even internally on a full accrual basis based on the standards that you follow. And you have, from looking at the change in net position I mentioned, you had positive changes in net position across the board there for each of them. The solid waste fund is the fund that would have essentially the movement of that composting activity to the general fund. Other financial statement pieces, looking at some of the footnotes that we consider to be pretty significant. Note 7 is your pension plan footnote. And the snapshot you have here is looking at your non-uniform and your police plan, basically your pension, your total pension liability, the funds that are already set aside in the plan to cover cost, and then your net liability, or in this case, asset. So a couple years ago, you did have a net liability based, for the most part, with contributions and the rebounding of the market and having some investment gains in both of those plans. You were able to swing to a net asset position and be over 100% funded. That can obviously change again depending on the market, but it's good that you're at least sitting at being fully funded currently. So some information that comes more from the back of your financial statements, the statistical section of your annual comprehensive report. You can see at varying levels over the past 10 years what your debt limit was, the amount of debt that's applicable to that limit, and then your debt margin. So you can see you're hovering around 50% from that perspective. As far as the single audit is concerned, the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, what we call the CFA, where you disclose all of your federal programs that you have, your grant funding, and how many expenditures you've applied to them each year to those programs. This you can see $3.8 million was incurred of federal cost during the year. 3 million of that was the final allocation of your ARPA funds that you had. You finished out your Tiger project, and then your CDBG funds also are obviously in there. The management letter, that's one of the two other letters that you receive separate from the financial statement. Here in the management letter is where we summarize either upcoming standards that may affect the borough and kind of describe a summary of what that standard is and what impact it could have. And if there were any other recommendations, suggestions for implementing or changing something, how you're operating, bettering internal controls, things like that, we would include that in that letter. This year essentially was mainly just the new standards and then also the graphs, which some of them are included in here, but we provide the graphs in that letter that give you a little bit more of a visual picture and a trend analysis of the borough of the last 5 years. So for the graphs, the first one here, your cash and investment, it's broken out by the different funds that you have. And so you can see the past 5 years and where you stand with those different funds. The main fluctuations you are seeing are the general and capital projects, where it's just dependent on your excess of revenue or expenses, capital project wise, if you take out debt, if you have significant capital projects where you're utilizing the reserves, that's where you're getting those swings. Looking at your revenue, this is just by category. So this is for governmental funds by different categories, and then the proprietary funds are just inclusive of all revenue in that fund. But you can see, for the most part, from a governmental fund standpoint, your revenue sources are coming from your taxes and your intergovernmental revenue, which is your state, local, or state, federal funding that you get, which is not uncommon for any municipality. They're usually very heavily funded by local support with taxes, and then any kind of funding that you get from the state or federal governments. Looking at expenses here, again, going through the first few sections is categorical for the governmental funds, which is essentially, for the most part, your general highway aid, capital projects, and then your proprietary funds in total. So looking here, you have public safety, obviously, is one of your highest expenses for the borough. That's, again, not uncommon when you have a police force. Obviously, employing those officers is going to be a significant cost to the municipality. So that's where you can see the bulk of your expenses. Change in fund balance or net position. So here is, again, by each fund, you can see the ups and downs throughout the years of your major funds that you have. The other letter that you have is our required communication letter. This is what we consider essentially our catch-all letter. There's a lot of different pieces of information in it that is addressed to the board. We don't always have the opportunity to present in front of the board the results of our audit. So whether we do or not, this is a required letter that just communicates all of that activity to you. So some of the things that are in that letter are acknowledging any significant estimates or disclosures that are in your financial statements, kind of bringing them to your attention. If there were any difficulties in performing the audit, disagreements with management, any issues that we would have had in performing the audit, they would be communicated there. There were none, so it was just the normal required language in there. The other part of that letter is all of the adjustments. So any adjustments that we make from the time we receive your initial numbers for the year to what you see on your financial statements, that information is communicated in that letter. We also include in that letter journal entries that management would not make internally. They are what we deem the journal entries for the conversion to bring on those capital assets, the debt, all that stuff. We still communicate those entries to you just so you can see the changes that were made based on the activity that you had during the year, but they're not made internally in your records. So again, just in summary, good, clean audit opinion, no findings. You had, except for the highway aid liquid fuels fund, you had a positive change to add to your reserves for each of your other funds. And the single audit this year was just the ARPA program that you have, which was then closed out. Any questions?
Any questions? No, we're just excited when it's unmodified, as unexciting as that sounds.
Yep.
We're happy to hear. Okay.
The verbiage used to be unqualified, and there were a lot of questions
That doesn't
around
sound
that because
good.
it sounds bad. So thankfully they changed it to something that the normal non-accountant person would understand and make sense, that your heart doesn't skip a beat when you hear it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for running through that with us. Thank you. Have a
You're
good
welcome.
evening.
If anything comes up, if you have questions, feel free to just run them through Richard. He can get them to us and we'll get you an answer.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Next up, we have a lingering outside agency funding request from CALC because of an IT issue. We did not receive it in time on our end, and so to be fair, we want to make sure that we hear the application. So you can go ahead.
Hello. Thank you for hearing this. I appreciate it. I understand if it's not possible anymore, but I figured I'd just update you guys anyway. Excuse me, I'm very congested today. My name is Mary Olin Geiger. Some of you know me as Mo. We at Calc over just right across the alley over here are in a period of transition and growth with new audiences, partners, and community members. So that means uh, if we want to maintain a vibrant artistic community here, we want to do some more homework. And so this application is kind of furthering our mission of service. We want to do some research out in the community with other partners, other groups, at listening sessions about some public artworks that we'd like to do over the next few years. And in order to figure out what people want out in public and what people want to be talked about and discussed, we need to kind of get together and work with them on that. Oh my gosh. How do I share that? No. Slideshow. From beginning. There we go. Can you see it? Nice. Okay. The Cal Collaborative is what I'm kind of in charge of at Cal, which is the community engaged art programs and projects. Um, And y'all might know this program called Artworks, which is a middle school community engaged creative program. And then we've recently expanded this into high school with Art Lab, which we've successfully gotten grant funding for, which I'm really excited about. These kids really love spending time together and thinking about the things that they care about out in the world. We have worked with Bosser Library and Central PA Conservancy at Spring Garden to do projects with these kids so they can learn about their local area and environment. This is a workshop that we did with an artist named Mia Cinelli, who came in to Calc from out of state to put up an exhibition of her work and also do a mudlarking excursion into the Litort, which was part art project and part creek cleanup. And so this is kind of an example of something that we tested out and was really successful. We had a great group show up to participate in this. This is the kind of thing that we would, pitch to a community, a group of community members, and talk about the ways these kinds of workshops can be interesting to them. And these are the results of the mudlarking experience, all of the kind of interesting garbage we found kind of put up at the library and the historical society, which is also something that we're interested in, bringing some of these artworks that we make with artists at Calc and in public spaces into other public spaces in the area, so that other places that people occupy can contain more creative thinking. This is one thing that we've done for the past 2 years in my tenure with the collaborative. We've worked with the Skills Center to, at our annual Empty Bowls dinner for Project Share, we have gotten together a group of individuals from one country. The first year it was 4 countries. And they explore with my artworks kids and then with everybody at Calc kind of one soup recipe or multiple soup recipes from their country of origin. So it's kind of exploring this idea of sharing food together and learning about each other in an active environment. And in this case, the art was the soup, which we made together at Project Share. And that was really fun. And this is another example of kind of ways that we're getting these creative thinking processes out into active space with people, so we can have fun getting to know each other better. This is called Children Thrive with the Basics 5. Y'all might be familiar with this because it's a United Way initiative, but the way Cal got involved was gathering 5 artists to interpret these basic principles of early childhood development. And we placed these artworks, reproductions of the artworks, up at the YMCA on the south side. And that gave people the ability to kind of become familiar with this initiative and learn about these principles in a space that many people go to in Carlisle on a regular basis. And then these are just things that we kind of do that I'd like to do more. One is called Art on the Farm at Red Tomato Farm. It's an ongoing program with adults with disabilities. We bring artists in to do creative projects and introduce people to working with this kind of really special group of people. And then we also have groups that can come into the gallery and do gallery tours. This is a group from Dickinson on the right-hand side who's touring Mia Cinelli's visit, who you saw earlier with the mudlarking. And then these are recent workshops that I did. One at the Carlisle Tool Library, which is a show related to a show opening on Friday. Come out if you can. Um, and also at the Skills Center as they're part of their one of their celebrations of their community on site there at the Skills Center. We did this kind of group collage making together. And these are both kind of examples of ways that we can get people together to think about some of these creative processes by making things together. And so, what we're trying to do is 3 listening sessions. And the goal is to brainstorm neighbors' interests in public artworks and the ideas that these artworks explore. Some that have brought up already are inclusivity, financial literacy, and local environmental concerns. Each listening session will contain a creative workshop related to those subjects to kind of jumpstart a conversation. And locally made food will be made available for free of charge at the event. That's at least the goal, so that people can, enjoy food together at no cost and participate in this workshop for free. So that's it. Any questions?
I just had one quick question.
Yeah.
Did you guys do the little mural on the back of Bosler Library?
Yeah, that was the artworks kid.
I love that thing so much. And,
The
you had
night
and
critters.
the other statement was you had a great float walking group in the Halloween parade.
Oh yeah. Well, yours is pretty good too.
You provide, so I'm saying
Mhm.
scholarship, but you provide scholarships or funding for children who might not be able to
Yes,
do
yes.
otherwise.
Both of our programs we have scholarships for. It's technically sliding scale, but they're funded programs. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I didn't realize that until a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's good to get out there, and I think frequently what I was told is frequently it's not entirely spent during the year,
Mhm.
so to get the word out and make
Yeah,
sure people
absolutely.
can utilize that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
great.
Mhm.
Anything else?
I guess I can't remember if you touched on this or
Mhm.
not, but the Empty Bowls event. I mean, that's a fundraiser for Project Share, right?
Mhm.
That's sort of like
Yes.
raising. I mean, it's like a really kind of I think a great community event.
Mhm.
I mean, it's packed. Like there's a huge line out the door every year that's been run. That you guys have sort of been running it, and so
Totally. And that's kind of what we're trying to do in that we're trying to get kind of this creative thinking and artwork into these events that are already happening, and try to kind of see what other organizations are already doing, which is why we want to partner with people for these things. So, yeah.
Anything else?
Mhm.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm trying to decide. We have Mr. Richmond here, and you're toward the end of the agenda, so I might just move you up if you don't mind. Yeah, why don't we take care of that now? It's under sustainable community and economic planning, which would be Mr. Shiles' chairmanship, but you don't have to worry about it for now. This is your first meeting. We're gonna ease you into this. All right, Mr. Richmond, when you're ready.
All right. I think I might need a little help with bringing that one up.
over here if it's not coming out.
Okay.
I'll run it for you.
You should. I got it. I got it. Thank you. Good evening. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to talk about the recent identification level survey that was conducted. My name is Charles Richmond. I'm the architectural historian with the ASC group, and I supervise the survey. The project was the survey of the Carlisle Historic District. The purpose was to collect information to update the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission's records and to provide a tool to help the borough in preservation planning moving forward. The survey was undertaken in April, May, and early June. We had ASC historians and just there. Okay. Sorry. The information was collected using the Survey 123 mobile application. Again, Our survey teams were assisted by volunteers from the HARB and from the Borough, who helped to take photographs. 1,887 properties were visited and documented. Each one of those properties is now entered into the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission's PA Share database. If you were to go to PA Share, this is what it would look like. If you were to search for Carlisle, the blue outline is the survey area we looked at, and then each one of those resources was documented. If you would go to that resource, this example is the Cumberland County Prison. Each resource had specific information collected in the field, physical information, tax parcel, location, and other information, along with a photograph and a boundary. This is some of the other information that was collected during the survey. Again, each property was assigned a resource name, which is usually its physical address. We did give properties that had a historic name, we included that as well. We included basic information about the foundation, wall materials, and roof materials. Any additions or alterations were noted. We included architectural style based on the appearance of the property at the time of the survey. We included what we thought were the historic functions and the current functions. We provided a year built estimate, and that was based on a couple sources of information. It was based on the physical inspection of each property. We used Cumberland County tax parcel records, and we consulted with historic maps that were available. So those dates are estimates. No in-depth deed research or anything like that was done for those, but those are our best estimates. Comments on any property, about its integrity, any historical information we might have found during the course of the background research. Just a little bit about the district. The district is listed in the National Register. It's historic for its significance in the areas of government and commerce, and it's also noted for its architectural significance. And the district had a period of significance from 1751 to 1951. I just wanted to highlight a few of the various properties that we were able to document during the course of the survey. Carlisle retains a good collection of mid to late 18th century properties. We just included a couple here. Good examples of Georgian and federal style architecture. Again, some of these properties we felt were significant all on their own. Properties like the Duncan Styles House is probably one of the best federal style architecture in the town. The borough continued to grow through the 19th century, and that's seen in the architecture. There's a good population of Queen Anne style, Second Empire, Italianate, and late Victorian architecture. One of the most common styles we applied to properties in the borough was vernacular. That is used to describe local building traditions and materials. These were a couple of very unique ones we found. They were row homes and duplexes. We found a large number of those dating from the mid-19th century on. And the 120, 122 North Pitt and the South Bedford houses show some rare examples of houses that had wood block exteriors that were designed to look like stone. There was a large population of those buildings in the community. The borough is home to a lot of commercial, industrial, and transportation-related buildings. The Carlisle Theater, as an Art Deco building, stands out. A lot of the commercial buildings were concentrated on High and Hanover, They built during the late 19th and early 20th century. A lot of them underwent significant modifications during the mid 20th century, where they ended up with modern first floors and retained the historic above other stories. Oops. And while we were doing research, we came across Project 61. I don't know if any of you are aware of it. During the late 1950s, there was an effort to revitalize the downtown area. And what they came up with was the idea to add colonial revival kind of elements to buildings. The first image there was the before. The middle image is the artist's rendering of what he was promoting. And the last one is what it looks like today. The architect was Richard Reed, and he proposed 55 renderings. We're not sure how many were actually completed, but you can find them. Carlisle's home to a lot of public buildings. One of the most impressive is the county prison. It's one of the most unique buildings you're going to find in the area, and there aren't very many like that. Another one that we found was the former Pennsylvania National Guard building. It was built in 1881 and is now owned by the church next door. And there were 20 churches within the historic district. It includes a number of high-style architect design buildings, but also a number of smaller neighborhood churches. Not all are still used as a church. This slide shows something that we encountered during the survey. The first image is of the original building, built in the late 19th century. The center one shows a reconstruction, and the final slide shows what it appears like today. One of the biggest challenges with establishing dates for a lot of the commercial buildings was the fact that they continued to be expanded and receive new facades over the course of the year. So I just wanted to point out a few of the sources that we used for our research. The Cumberland County Historical Society had a great deal of information on the borough, but also on a number of the individual properties. Dickinson College's archives has a good collection on the properties that they own. And the Pennsylvania Sanborn Insurance Map collection was probably one of the most useful resources we found. Carlisle is covered from the late 1800s through the 1960s, and it really helped create a good picture of how the community grew and developed. As part of the survey, we collected the data that was shown there on the PA Share. That was all entered and uploaded into PA Share. Again, you can see that now live. PA Share is open to the public, so anyone can view it. We also provided digital photographs of each property that was visited. We provided a spreadsheet that included all the PA Share data. GIS shapefiles were provided by the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission to the borough. And we prepared a final report summarizing what we did. Some of the applications for the results. One of the main reasons for the survey was to update PA Share's record, and now there's 1,887 new records for them. The information can be used to help review the limits of the Carlisle Historic District. The information can also be used to create a designation of buildings and monuments that the community finds worthy. And it can also be used to help develop a program to promote interest in preservation. Again, I want to thank you for the support for this project, and we appreciate having the opportunity to work with it.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? No? Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, back to the agenda item number 4 in the meeting minutes. Is there a motion to review and approve October 2nd, 2024 workshop meeting minutes?
So moved.
There's a motion by the Deputy Mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Stube. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Next, under my report, start with an explanation of why this is on here to start with, although some of you probably at least have an inkling. Um, uh, if you're like me, you've probably heard in the community and on social media that people were having some difficulty with parking kiosks and adjusting to them. And in combination with that, there were some concerns by business owners downtown that they were seeing a drop off in business over the last couple of months, especially since September. I personally spoke to about a dozen business owners a week ago. Today, I met with a small group of business owners to have some group discussion about some of the issues. There's an array of, depending on who you talk to, some blame the kiosks, some say this is just kind of economics right now, and the kiosks, if they have any effect, have pretty limited effect. That may depend from business to business too, but the reality is that a lot of our businesses downtown are struggling. They're seeing significant revenue drop-offs, especially again since September time period, and I'm talking about 20 to 30% drop-off in income for these businesses, and these are the businesses we rely on to really be the heartbeat of our downtown. With an idea of trying to make coming downtown as friction free, especially during popular time over the lunchtime period, while balancing the fact that the reason that we had meters and have kiosks to start with is to ensure that there's room for patrons to be there and move on, instead of having employees who might be parking downtown all day long and eating up parking spaces. I'm going to be suggesting and looking for a motion to allow free parking in our kiosk areas from 11:30 to 2 p.m. on weekdays starting November 12th and running through December 27th. In analyzing that, I asked staff to pull some parking revenue data. And Richard, I have it in front of me, but if you want to supplement what we have here at all, or feel free to correct me too, but I'm just going to go off these numbers. What we pulled were numbers from 2020 and then each year, running really from July through the end of the year. And of course, we don't have through the end of the year quite yet here. But when we look at August, September, October time period from year to year, August and September this year seem to be pretty close to on par with what prior years are. It fluctuates from year to year, but kind of in the vicinity. There was a pretty steep drop off in parking revenue in October, which may coincide with businesses really starting to feel some crunch. So as I said, in an effort to try to make access to the downtown as friction free during those popular times in the middle of the weekday, what Richard was able to pull was the nice thing about the systems that we've had is we can tell hour by hour what kind of revenue that we've had over the years, and from the 11 a.m. hour through the 1 p.m. hour, so taking us to 2 o'clock in August, we generated about $5,450 total. I'm sorry, from coins and cards, and then about $5,000 from the app. So we're seeing the apps really starting to pick up, where that had been, just to give a comparison, although I don't think monthly comparison. Let's go back to September. Well, 2020 is not a good example, huh? September 2022, the apps were about $4,544 per month that month. and now it's over $8,000. So we're seeing a shift to app use over the course of the month. But just to give council a sense of what kind of revenue loss there might be, and remember too that we have unallocated economic development dollars. For September, we're at about eight $9,000. It would be in revenue loss during those hours, and looking at October's numbers, that was about $7,000. So I think it's the reason I'm making the proposal. Obviously, is that our businesses need some support, and we have the unallocated budget to be able to support that as economic support downtown. And I'm open to any questions or comments you might have, or that Richard might be able to answer to.
I have a question, if you could clarify. It's my understanding that the Downtown Carlisle Association also receives funding from the parking meters and the parking structure. And is this going to be, are we borrowing from them now so that they won't be having that revenue that's generated at a later time?
No, that's what I noted. We have unallocated economic development dollars. So some of the money so we gave some of that money to the Carlisle Theater. We have a budgeted economic development fund, so we wouldn't be eating into the DCA funds, because I think over the next couple months there's more than enough unallocated under the economic development fund to be able to support that without eating into the funds that we allocate for DCA.
Okay, I just didn't want them to feel unsupported and not getting those DCA funds if we are not able to generate that revenue by collecting money from the parking.
Right. Yeah, it wouldn't affect that.
I also had a question about the start time being 11:30. You had said that 11 was the hour. Why not just extend it to 11 and make it 11 to 2?
That's fine. That's fine too. We were just kind of looking at the lunch hour and sort of extended it until 2 o'clock.
Yeah, 11:30 is kind of like is it 11:30 yet? You know, I want to confuse people with the times.
Yep. Any other questions or comments?
I just have a comment. I think we've all probably had conversations with citizens about parking. And I've heard a couple of people say, well, why don't you just make all parking free? And so obviously the reason we're not doing that is because if parking were free downtown, those parking spaces would be taken up primarily by employees, either at the county buildings or at the businesses themselves or local residents. And so there wouldn't be any parking for people to patronize businesses. So I do think this is a nice compromise that's going to prevent that from happening, but allow for the free parking during what is, for most businesses, their busiest portion of the day.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thanks. And there was some feedback in the meeting last week too that some of the businesses, I mean, they understand what we do with these parking fund dollars, but they feel that it's a good idea coming. That they feel that we probably don't educate our residents well enough on what we're doing with those funds, because you hear kind of why do we have the parking? I think that, again, thanks for underscoring the reason for that, Councilor Mellon. Why did we ever have the meters for decades and decades? And that's exactly why. But then it's nice for folks to know what we're actually doing with those dollars. So, Councilor Bruce, thanks for touching on that a little bit. And I think we maybe need to do a better job of educating folks, what we do with those funds and how important they are to the downtown. So if somebody wants to make a motion and maybe start it at 11 o'clock, it sounds like Councilor Bruce would be amenable to that.
Sorry. What am I doing?
The motion on the mayor's report.
Oh, yes. I make a wait. What? Sorry, I didn't hear you. Oh, so moved. Yes.
Okay, so it's a motion to provide free parking at all Borough on-street and Borough lot metered locations between the hours of 11 o'clock to 2 p.m. from November 12th through December 27th, 2024 for the holiday season. That's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Mellon. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you, everybody. And I know the businesses will appreciate the support. Next up, budget and finance.
Thank you. I have one item for this evening. I make the motion that Borough Council may consider approving a payment in lieu of real estate taxes pilot agreement with Safe Harbor Incorporated for the collective properties outlined in the agreement.
And I am the vice chair, but I have to recuse myself from this as I represent represent Safe Harbor as counsel to them. So I'm going to remove myself from any further discussion or any managing of this vote. Pass it on to Deputy Mayor.
So I have made a motion and I'm looking for a second.
Second.
And is there any discussion on this item? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I said aye too. And the motion passes.
And Madam Secretary, please note my recusal. Thank you. Next, employee relations, citizen participation.
I move that council appoint Ms. Stephanie Taylor to the position of Open Records Officer and Ms. Jamie Long to the position of Alternate Open Records Officer effective November 7th, 2024. From what I understand, that's just a flip-flop of their roles currently. So.
Councilor Mellon makes a motion to appoint Stephanie Taylor to the position of Open Records Office and Jamie Long to the alternate Open Records Office effective November 7th. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Perry. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Thank you, Councilor Mellon. Public Works, I can just run with that since it's just a discussion led by Mr. Bergston on Vision Zero. Timely too, because we've had some pedestrian incidents the last day or two.
Yes, good evening. Just wanted to give you a brief update on what's been going on with the Vision Zero subcommittee. Next slide, please. Vision Zero has a definition that they created, and it's a fairly, I'll say, lofty goal, but it's steeped in the concept that these deaths are preventable, and that I think is reasonable. There are a lot of things that could be done to drastically reduce the number of deaths. But it does come at a cost, of course, but we think that is a good goal to have. Next slide. I also wanted to just briefly touch on how we have 3 different initiatives going on that sometimes, I mean, even Mitch can attest from when we were discussing things at the Climate Action Committee for Transportation, how we get a little bit confused. Is this Vision Zero? Is this climate action? Is this active transportation? What's the difference between these 3 things? And so I wanted to talk to this slide just so that you can very succinctly see what the goal is for each of those initiatives. So for Vision Zero, as we said, it's zero transportation deaths. For the Climate Action Committee, it's to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And for active transportation, it's to replace motorized trips with non-motorized trips. Now, the cool thing is that if we focus on safely designing and improving our pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, that in and of itself supports all 3 of those goals and all 3 of those initiatives. So that's kind of the tie-in. But there are some times where the goals are in slight conflict. Not a lot, but it does happen. But at least we can focus on improved bike ped infrastructure and say that meets all 3 of those goals. Susan put together a great subcommittee that takes expertise from all of our different areas. Traditionally, a lot of these safety problems are solved by traffic engineers. And what Vision Zero did is they said, hey, it's not just traffic engineers that need to be involved with this. We need to involve the police, people that are familiar with parks. And so you can see from the list there that we've got a nice cross-section of our different disciplines within the borough, all participating and thinking together about how to solve the problems. I've got 4 quick project highlights, and then I've got 2 policy initiatives that I'll go over. The first one is East Lowther Street. We got several complaints about speeding. That particular block of East Lowther between East Street and Spring Garden is a pretty long block, and so you can generate a decent amount of speed if you wanted to. So there is a alleyway there, Porter Avenue, and what we wound up doing was putting speed humps on either side of Porter Avenue to kind of break up. So you've got east, then you've got a speed hump, then you've got Porter, then you got a speed hump, and you got Spring Garden. And the neat thing about this particular design of the speed humps is it's subdivided into 3 sections. And the advantage of that is that you can have stormwater run through the holes in between the 3 sections. And then also there's enough space between the speed hump and the curb for bicycles to navigate without having to go over the speed hump itself. And so that was just installed recently, and it seems to be working. I went out there and observed, and certainly, I mean, the funny thing is that the cars do try to still speed up in between them, but definitely speeds are lower there now than they were before. Next project. Okay, this one I got to give big kudos to Jared because he was kind of the architect of putting together how do we figure out a way to tap into this Safe Streets for All grant money. Typically, a borough our size is not going to be competitive for these federal grants. And so the concept was, what if we band together with other municipalities and go after grant money to try to run test pilots for a lot of the improvements that we'd like to see in place. And the grant itself was broken up into 3 parts. The first is to develop a quick build guide so that we've got something to work from, a manual to work from. The second is to actually purchase a lot of the quick build materials. And then the third piece is to conduct a road safety audit where we pay a consultant to produce that document. And the thought process there is that by having those in hand, we would be able to have some more leverage when talking to PennDOT about improvements to their roadways that will facilitate bike and ped movements. Next project. This one you're probably a little bit familiar with. It's the Bedford East Corridor Traffic Calming Project. And we just wrapped up the conceptual design phase where we wanted to look at different concepts in kind of a 2D format and lay out lots of different options for traffic calming. And we had a couple meetings and we got feedback from the residents, and we wound up with removing 1 lane of travel. Since both of those are one-way streets and they were effectively 2 lanes of travel, we can remove 1 lane of travel and replace it with the protected bike lane. We heard pretty strongly that the protected bike lane behind parked vehicles is what would be preferred. Again, these are all concepts. We haven't even moved into full design yet, but that's where we're headed next. So you'll be seeing us present at some point in the future here within the next month probably options for what design or what design options we can engage Dawood with to proceed and get something that would then be constructible. Okay, and then this small victory, and it was another Council Stubbe, I think that you actually brought this to our attention. There's actually depressed curb where both Bedford and East come to a point, but there was no crosswalk. And so we met with the residents, talked about what some of the parking implications, loss of parking would be, came up with a plan that was acceptable to everyone, and then put in what we call the ladder style crosswalks so that they're a little more visible. FHWA definitely touts them as being one of the best for visibility. And so we had those installed just recently. And then moving on to 2 policy pieces. Even though I said earlier that generally a small borough like ourselves wouldn't be competitive for the federal grants, we got word from the feds that they actually wanted to encourage everybody to apply. So we thought, well, why not go after a grant to hire a consultant to put together a Vision Zero plan? City of Lancaster did this very effectively. They got grant money to put together the plan, and then they got a boatload of grant money to implement the plan. So we're going to try to follow in their footsteps and do something similar. And then the final policy highlight is we receive a lot of requests for traffic calming. I'm not sure exactly all the factors. I mean, we know that during COVID, there was a lot less traffic on the streets and people started driving faster. It seems like people still haven't slowed down. And so we're not quite sure exactly the reasoning for all of why we're getting so many more requests, but we are. And so Susan brought to our attention that Chambersburg has a traffic calming policy, and the mayor brought to our attention that Salem, Massachusetts has a neighborhood traffic calming program. And so we looked at those two um, ideas on how to figure out when these requests come in, how do we prioritize them, how do we process them, what, we can't do everything, so which ones bubble to the top. And so we are in the middle of developing that policy right now. We're taking the approach that we'd like to be able to arrive at a prioritization somewhat quickly. In other words, we don't want to do a lot of studies. We don't want to spend all of our time doing studies and none of our time actually implementing the traffic calming um, improvements themselves. So we're thinking about kind of a tiered, is this a high or a medium or a low volume roadway? Is it close to a school? Things that can be figured out rather quickly rather than having to go out and collect a bunch of data. Um, I mean, Salem's program, that's what they do. They go out, they get traffic counts for every single place, and it's pretty costly. But I think that we could be a little more effective and nimble if we use some what I'll call engineering judgment and come up with a prioritization process that is effective for us. So we'd like to hear back from SS4A, hopefully positively, about the Vision Zero Plan Development Grant. We're going to continue to refine the traffic calming request prioritization, and then we'll start applying that to a lot of the resident requests. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions?
One thing we had talked about, I think, a bit in maybe climate action, about the prioritization requests, specifically about the requests themselves. So I just wanted to more publicly say it so we could have a little discussion about it. I think it's really important to have like a prioritization policy so we can figure out like what goes first. But one of the concerns that I have had has been areas that have a lot of rentals, people coming in and out. Because at one point there was discussion a couple years ago about, maybe having a certain percentage, 50% of, bordering houses if they were requesting some sort of traffic calming. But some places are much easier to do than others. People that have lived in the same neighborhood on that corner for, decades. But other places have high concerns and yet not as much in, connection with the residents that might be new. So my initial statement was about using our online presence with what's it called again? I always forget. Stephanie, what's our program called that we do surveys on? The Citizen, right? So and also the idea that it is important, obviously, to ask people that live in that community. But I know certain areas by dropping my kid off at school, right? Or I know places that I'm afraid I might get hit, but I don't necessarily live right there. There might be places that you're always on because you're going to work and whatnot. So I want to make sure that we as like council have a vision and can help channel some of these projects that we should be looking at and applying policy to. But I just want to make sure that we also have in place ways that people can submit places of concern, and that it's not just folks that have the time, right? So
Any other comments, questions?
I have a comment. I know that you and I walk in the same areas.
Yep.
And I saw you this morning with my dog. One of the things that I would love to see as part of this program would be to transition away from antagonistic walk signals So right now you have to go and push the button and then the walk signal will come on. I lived in Manhattan for a long time and that's not something you ever have to do. You never have to go to a pole and push a button. And I know that there's going to be some pushback about it, but I don't think that the onus should be on the pedestrian to signal to drivers that they are intending to cross the street. There were two pedestrians that were hit, um, one today and one 4 days ago. And so I'm just very concerned. I have concern every single time that my husband crosses the street with our dog. And I know that you cross that intersection too.
Mm-hmm.
That intersection is incredibly busy with law students and students that are going to and from Moreland and people that live in the area. And I agree that just because I'm speaking out about that intersection, which I think is dangerous, and I realize that we have very limited control over that intersection because it doesn't fully belong to us. But again, I think that this can maybe be applied in other areas where there may be intersections that we have more control over. And I'm sure it's going to cost money, and I'm sure that there's going to be some pushback about it. But I just don't think that, I think that there'll be more people using walk signals if they don't have to properly engage with the walk signal. And that cars will be more aware of walk signals if it's something that they should expect rather than something that just happens randomly whenever they're driving their car. So I have told Susan about this before, but I'm just also saying this here in relation to this presentation. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Mr.
I
Shaw?
just wanted to say I do appreciate the design and the speed humps. I'm always a little worried because I don't have any suspension on my bike. I have a cargo bike. Sometimes there's a lot of stuff. Like, I bungee it down as well as I can. But, like particularly trips to the compost site, which I take East Lowther for that. So it's really nice having those like sort of gaps that you can ride through because, I'm going about the speed that the cars should be going when they're slow down for the speed bump. So it was great. So I'm glad to see that. Yeah.
And Jeff, I assume as we move forward with that prioritization, it's going to come back to council to fine tune details and that's
For sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I do have one. I
Go
guess.
ahead.
Oh, sorry. Oh, when is I guess what are the due dates for the SS4A grant?
Yeah, I think we should be hearing back from. I mean, it does vary, and it's the federal government, so they sometimes don't. But I was thinking we might actually have already heard by now. So
Okay, great.
Hopefully, it'll be in the next month or two.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Next, sustainable community and economic planning. You're on item number 2. Deputy Mayor's going to handle that one as we ease Mr. Shiles into his counselorship.
So I make the motion that Borough Council reaffirm the mayor's execution of a revocable license agreement by and between the Borough of Carlisle and the County of Cumberland to continue to maintain its point-to-point network.
Deputy Mayor makes a motion to reaffirm my execution of a revocable license agreement by and between the borough and the county to maintain its point-to-point network. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Stubbe. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion carries. There is no new business, but I was trying to get a message to the borough manager in the midst of the meeting. I don't know if if we had a new director level employee, were you planning on introducing that person this evening, or should I make a comment, or how do you want it?
Well, I know that
I'm just hypothetically.
workshop were typically less formal. So I think you ought to go ahead and then I can, follow up at next Thursday's meeting with, the real formal.
Okay, you can run through all the background. And
That's right. But
we'll
go
wait.
right ahead, Sean.
And I think she brought a speech tonight too, so I didn't want to disappoint. So for those of you who don't know Marita Avon, who goes by Mo, we've known each other for quite some time. Mo has been a member of both fire companies in the borough over the years, and is now our director of water resources. I'm not going to put you on the spot tonight, Mo, but be prepared next week. But since you were here, I wasn't even thinking you were going to be here tonight. But appreciate you being here tonight as we run through all these items that you have nothing to do with. Yeah. And if you do want to just say a couple words, feel free.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. As you mentioned, I've been a longtime contributing member to the volunteer side of things here, so I'm happy to finally be on the payroll. But I'm really looking forward to getting my hands around a lot of the projects in the Water Resources Department. There's a lot of big ticket items right now going on, so it's been an interesting first 2 weeks. A lot of really good people that I get to work with now, and I look forward to hearing more from you guys on council. Thank you.
Welcome aboard. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thank you and also thank you for noting, because she was lurking over there earlier on the other side, and I was like, "Who is that?" And then
Who
she
is
took a
this
seat, and I was like,
person?
"Oh, so welcome."
I should tell this story since it's informal. It was like one of the first union banquets that I went to, and I'm just seeing Mo in turnout gear, right, and with like smut all over her face, and she's all dressed up for the banquet, and I turned around and she said hi. I had no idea who she was. Yeah. But thanks again, Mo. Next up is any public comment. Jen, you don't have any public comment, do you? Okay.
I'm just really excited to hear all the bike ped stuff that's happening.
Oh, good.
Why I came.
Oh, good. Thanks for being here. Steph, do we have anybody lurking on Zoom?
Lurking, but not any questions.
Okay, great. All right. Then hearing nothing further, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.